I saw the message. Not even a message, really. Just a picture in the family group chat. That photo said more than any word ever could. A rented cabin, sunlight slicing through pine trees, the lake behind it still and silver like something out of a childhood dream. And below it, lake trip, let's go back to the cabin. 26 likes, 3 comments. I reacted with a heart emoji. Just a small red symbol, polite, simple, safe. No one responded. 2 days passed, then came the call. My son's voice was soft, rehearsed, like he was delivering news to a patient. Hey, Mom. Listen, the cabin's full this year. You understand, right? Not a question. Not really. Of course, I said, my voice even. He offered something about how I could take it easy at home, maybe relax, treat yourself. I made a joke, said I'd enjoy the quiet. When the call ended, I sat still for a long time, the new swimsuit folded on my bed, tags still dangling. I'd bought it just in case. Navy blue with thick straps. Sensible. Nothing flashy. I deleted the photo I took in the mirror. It was easier than feeling foolish. And yet, I kept thinking of the dock, the one we built the summer their father got sick. How the boys used to leap off the end, arms flailing, laughing so loud the loons scattered. That cabin had meant something, still did, but maybe just to me. I booked the little place next door under a different name, a 1-bedroom, screen door swinging on rusted hinges, but it had a view of the same water, the same dock. I didn't tell anyone. I arrived a day early. The path was still there, worn thin by decades of bare feet and dragging coolers. I stood beneath the pines and listened. Voices echoed from the main cabin. My son's laugh, the quick, high-pitched shriek of my youngest granddaughter, chasing someone through the grass. They didn't see me. I turned before they could. That night, I lit a small fire outside my cabin. The wood was damp, so it smoked more than it burned. I roasted a single marshmallow, just one. My hands shook slightly as I turned the stick, though I told myself it was the chill. I played music on my phone, the old songs, the ones their father used to hum while grilling. The same songs we danced to barefoot on the dock once, before they called it cringe, before I was just grandma in the background. I looked across the lake as the stars blinked out one by one, and I whispered, not to anyone in particular. They forgot who built the dock. Then I smiled, because I hadn't forgotten how to float. It started in the kitchen. Isn't that always where the smallest fractures form? I was chopping carrots. The good kind, the ones from the farmer's market, with the dirt still clinging to their roots. I'd planned to make the stew Jamie loved as a boy, the one he used to call the orange dinner, because I always added a bit of sweet potato and a touch of paprika. I stirred the broth slowly, letting the smell fill the house. Something about onions in butter always made it feel like home. The phone buzzed on the counter. A new message in the group chat. A photo this time. Lily, my daughter-in-law, holding up 2 matching sets of swimsuits. Family lake trip prep, the caption read. Her tone was bright, enthusiastic, casual in that way that feels curated. In the background, I could just make out my eldest granddaughter's face in the mirror, giggling. No one tagged me. I set the spoon down. It clinked against the pot like a little bell announcing an end I hadn't agreed to. Jamie walked in a few minutes later, holding a half-folded laundry basket under one arm. He glanced at the stove. That smells like childhood. He kissed my cheek absently, like he used to when running out the door late for soccer practice, Then, just as casually, "Hey, about the trip, I meant to call." I wiped my hands on the dish towel. "Yes?" He set the basket down with a soft thud. "The cabin's full this year. Lily's parents are coming, and her sister's family. It's just, you know, tight. We figured you might enjoy the quiet anyway." He didn't look at me when he said it. His hands were already sorting through mismatched socks, as if talking logistics, not people. "Oh," I said, "of course, I could use the quiet." My voice sounded smooth, calm. I was proud of it. He smiled at that, a relieved smile, as if he'd dodged something. Then, picking up a pair of Emma's tiny pink socks, he added, "We'll FaceTime you from the boat. Promise. The kids will want to show off their cannonballs." Cannonballs. Off the dock I helped build. He didn't remember that part. He didn't need to. I nodded and stirred the pot again. This time, it smelled too salty. Jamie's phone buzzed, and he was gone before I could ask anything else. The front door shut softly. I stood there, just me, and the sound of simmering broth and the hum of the fridge. After dinner, I cleaned up. Quietly, automatically. I packed away the stew into small containers. One for Jamie, one for the freezer, one I knew I'd likely never use. When I went upstairs, I passed the full-length mirror in the hallway and paused. My reflection looked comfortable. That's the word. Not elegant, not festive, just comfortable. I opened my closet and took out the navy swimsuit I'd bought online last month. It still had the tag on. High neckline, tummy control, modest, but dignified. The kind of thing that says, I still care how I look, but I know what matters. I'd even picked up a matching sun hat. The receipt was still tucked in the brim. I held it up to the light and stared for a long time. Then I turned, walked down the hall, and placed the suit gently back into its packaging. Not in anger, just because. Somewhere in the house, a faucet dripped softly. The fridge clicked. The silence filled the spaces I used to occupy without asking. Later that night, I lay in bed listening to the crickets. One chirped so loudly outside my window, it almost sounded like protest. I reached for my phone, opened the group chat, scrolled back to the cabin photo, and stared at it. There was a time I would have offered to sleep on the couch just to be close. Now I wasn't even in the frame. I didn't comment. I didn't heart the photo again. I just turned the screen off and let the dark settle in around me. Not everyone's exile is loud. Some of us are just gently folded out of the picture. There wasn't a single moment when I vanished. No slammed doors, no ugly arguments, just subtraction. It started with breakfast. They used to wait for me, the kids especially. I'd shuffle into the kitchen in my robe, still tying the sash, and Emma would jump from her stool. "Grandma's here." Jamie would smile over his coffee, half asleep, and I'd pour my tea while Lily toasted the bread. Now, by the time I came down, the dishes were already in the sink. Lily had switched to almond milk. "Better for digestion," she said, and no one asked if I wanted my usual black tea. They made lattes in a sleek silver machine that sounded like a plane taking off. There was a time I would have found it funny. Now, I just found it loud. I started taking my toast in the den, a little plate balanced on the armrest. No butter, just apricot jam, which no one else liked anymore. They used to ask for my stew recipe, my banana bread. Last week, Lily said gently, "We're trying to do more plant-based stuff. Less oil, less sugar." I nodded. Of course. That night, they made cauliflower tacos and quinoa salad. I took one bite and smiled. Tastes healthy. They laughed, politely. Jamie patted my hand. After dinner, they all drifted into separate corners of the house. Emma on her tablet, Ben playing some game on his headset, half yelling into the air. Jamie answering work emails. Lily scrolling, always scrolling. I did the dishes. No one asked. They never did. But I couldn't stand leaving the pans like that. Crusted, soaking, accusing. So I washed, dried, and put everything away. I made sure the towels were changed, the counters wiped down. By the time I was done, the house had gone still. Laughter from upstairs, a door closing. I walked past the family room. The television was on, a sitcom I didn't know. The volume low, the sofa sagging on one side, where someone had been curled up. No one asked me to join. They never told me not to. But after a while, the not being seen started to feel like being told. I used to bake once a week. Now, the mixer sits silent in the cabinet. I offered banana bread last Sunday. Lily smiled kindly and said, "Maybe next time. We're trying to cut back." I stopped offering. In the hallway, I passed the framed photos on the wall. Family trips, smiling faces. The lake house, 3 summers ago. Jamie holding Emma on his shoulders, Lily laughing with a lemonade in hand. I was in one photo, barely. The edge of my face turned toward the grill. I stared at it a moment, then moved on. My room is downstairs, now. The guest suite, they call it. It has a fold-out couch and a window that looks out at the fence. No cross breeze, no birdsong. Just the sound of sprinklers in the morning and the hum of the dryer vent. I used to keep fresh flowers by the bed. Now, it's just a lamp and a stack of library books I keep renewing but never finish. I read a chapter, then lose interest. The words slide off. Nothing sticks lately. Even the cat stopped sleeping at my door. She used to curl up by my feet. Now, she belongs to Ben's room. Cats know where they're loved, Lily said once with a little laugh. Maybe they do. Some nights I fold laundry just to feel useful. Tiny socks, floral dresses, sweatshirts too large for me to lift when they're wet from the wash. I sort them into piles and hum under my breath. Old hymns. Nothing anyone would recognize now. They used to thank me. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Grandma. Now it's just assumed. One night, I sat at the table with my planner open. I'd written out everyone's birthdays in pen, drew small stars beside the kids' recital dates. I kept the calendar like a sacred thing. Now, no one checks it. The new one is digital, color-coded, shared only between Jamie and Lily. They don't need my planner anymore, or my reminders, or me, really. When I speak, they listen politely, but always with a flicker of distraction in their eyes. I'll say something, a memory, a thought, a joke, and they'll nod, smile vaguely, and return to whatever glow they're holding in their hands. Screens have faces now. Mine is just one of many, and not the one they scroll for. Sometimes I talk to myself when I water the garden, just softly, just to hear a voice that doesn't skip past me. I say things like, "That lavender's coming in nice," or "I'll need to trim that hydrangea before the frost." I say them aloud, even when no one answers. Especially then. I haven't bought new shoes in 2 years. The ones I have still work. They carry me where I'm allowed to go, which lately is only to the grocery store and back. Even there, the cashier asked me once, "You live alone?" I said yes before I even thought. Then I corrected myself. Sort of. But I don't explain anymore. It's too hard to explain what it feels like to live among people who no longer see you. I don't blame them. Not really. They're busy. Busy people forget quiet things. But I remember. I remember who packed the picnic baskets, who tied the shoelaces, who stayed behind while they leapt from docks and rode waves and grew up. They call it aging. I call it becoming scenery. And scenery doesn't speak. It frames the view. It doesn't ask to be in it. The lake didn't used to be quiet. It used to sing. Every summer, as soon as school let out, we'd pack up the old station wagon with towels that never quite dried, mismatched flip-flops, and a cooler so full it barely shut. Jamie would ride up front beside their father, squirming with excitement, while Michael and Ben fought over window seats in the back. I sat behind them, humming along to whatever cassette was playing, my hand resting on the thermos of coffee I'd filled that morning before sunrise. Always too early, always worth it. That first summer, we didn't even have a proper dock, just a few boards laid across stones, held together with rusting nails and stubborn hope. But it was ours. Paul and I found the cabin by accident. A friend of a friend was selling it cheap. Need some love, he'd warned. But we didn't need perfect. We needed possible. It had peeling paint and a slanted floor, a fireplace that smoked too much unless you knew the trick with the flue, and a screen door that sang a little squeal every time it opened. But it was magic. That first morning, Jamie woke up early, dragging his blanket across the floorboards. "Is this the lake, Mama?" he whispered, peeking through the curtains. "It is," I said. He turned, eyes wide. "Forever?" We stayed a week that first year, then a month the next, then every summer after that. We made rules: no shoes after the front step, no clocks in the living room, and every sunset had to be watched, even if you were mid-argument or halfway through dinner. That was Paul's rule. Sunsets wait for no one, he used to say. I can still see him out there, feet dangling from the dock, a cup of black coffee in one hand, his old fishing cap tilted back on his head. Jamie would sit beside him with a net, scooping at minnows. Michael liked to wander the path behind the cabin, picking up pine cones like treasure. Ben, the baby then, spent most of the time sticky with juice and laughter. One evening, the sky went from gold to violet in seconds. The air stilled. I remember it because we were all on the dock, all of us. Paul held my hand. Jamie had just caught his first real fish and was beaming, holding it aloft like a prize. Michael snapped a photo with the old Polaroid. It's still in my nightstand drawer. Ben, covered in marshmallow from the fire we'd just put out, leaned against my shoulder and whispered, "This is the best day." It was the kind of quiet that fills you, not empties you. After Paul passed, we skipped the lake for 2 years. I didn't have it in me. The dock was too empty. The cabin too loud with silence. But then Jamie called one spring and said, "Mom, let's go back, just for a weekend." That was the first time I went without Paul. I packed his old thermos anyway, sat on the dock early the first morning, and poured 2 cups. I let one sit beside me, steam curling into the soft dawn. It felt right. The kids were older then. Emma was 3. She toddled down the gravel path with Jamie behind her, careful and proud. Ben had grown tall, voice cracking with adolescence. He taught Emma how to skip stones that summer. I remember standing at the stove in the little kitchen, stirring pancake batter and listening to their voices filter in through the screens. Laughter, splashing, calls for, "Grandma, look." And I did look, every time, because that's what it meant then, to be needed, to be someone's landing place, someone's audience. Lily asked me to bring the big red cooler that year. You know, the one with the good lid, she'd said. I packed it full of sandwiches, fruit salad, and her favorite lemonade. She hugged me when I arrived, tight. "We're so glad you came, Mary," she said. I believed her. That weekend, they surprised me. Jamie had found an old photo, the one of Paul and me on the dock, both sunburned and smiling. They'd printed it, framed it, and placed it on the fireplace mantel in the cabin. "We thought he should still be here," Jamie said. I cried, quietly. Not out of grief, but gratitude. That was 7 years ago. The photo's still in their garage somewhere, I think. Last time I asked, Lily said she meant to bring it in, but they were reorganizing the bins. Now, when I stand on a dock, it's mine alone. The thermos stays home. The laughter comes from cabins I don't belong to, and no one calls for me to, "Look, Grandma." But the memory remains. Not dusty, not faded, warm, alive, like a match still burning inside an old matchbox. I almost believed it would be different. It was a Thursday evening, late June. The air was warm enough that the windows stayed open, the screens buzzing with the occasional mosquito, and the scent of cut grass drifted in like a memory. I had just finished folding towels, the thin beach kind with faded cartoon whales and frayed edges, the ones Jamie used to drag around the cabin, wrapped like superhero capes. I didn't ask why they were in the laundry, just washed, dried, folded. That's what I do. It's what I've always done. Lily came into the kitchen with her phone in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. "Mom," she said, and I looked up, surprised, honestly. She rarely called me that anymore. Usually it was Mary or nothing at all. "Hey," she smiled, tired around the edges, and said, "I think we need your help." My heart did something foolish. It leapt, just slightly, like a dog that still runs when it hears the leash jingle, even after it's been left alone too many times. "Of course," I said. "What do you need?" She set the bag down on the counter. There was sunscreen inside, bug spray, a new inflatable duck for the lake. "The kids have a list of things they want to bring," she said. "But Jamie's slammed with work, and I've got the end of quarter reports." I nodded. "You want me to pack?" "Could you?" she asked, already opening her calendar app. "Just the kid stuff. We'll handle our own bags." Our own. That phrase sat oddly on the counter between us. But I nodded again. I even smiled. "I'll get it done tomorrow," I said, as if I were confirming an order, as if it didn't mean anything to be asked, to be needed, to be considered part of something again. That night, I pulled out the old plastic bins from the hallway closet, the ones we used to call the lake bins, still labeled in Jamie's childish handwriting, cabin stuff. I opened the first and breathed in the dust and citronella. Inside, the sand toys were still there, faded red shovel, broken sieve, Emma's old water shoes, too small now, a deck of warped playing cards. I added what I could. Extra swim diapers for Ben, Emma's favorite floaties. I even remembered to pack the marshmallow skewers, the metal ones with wooden handles that didn't get too hot. It felt good, familiar, like muscle memory. For a moment, I believed that maybe this summer would be different. Maybe the little cabin was booked because of logistics. Maybe they hadn't meant to exclude me. Maybe someone would realize I belonged. I let myself believe that for one night. The next morning, I set the bins by the front door, stacked neatly, ready to go. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat with my cup, listening for the sound of footsteps, the light patter of Emma's sneakers, the thump of Ben dragging his stuffed raccoon. The house was quiet, too quiet for a family leaving for vacation. I checked the clock, 7:53, then 8 to 12, then 9:05. No one came down. By 9:30, I peeked into the garage. The car was gone. The bins were still by the door. A note sat on the kitchen island, scribbled in Lily's handwriting. "Hey, Mary, we left early to beat traffic. Didn't want to wake you. Don't worry about the bins. We had most of the stuff already packed. Back in a week." Back in a week. No mention of the skewers, or the towels, or the hands that packed them. I read the note twice, then once more, as if somewhere between the lines there might be a mistake. A message left unsaid. A sign I'd simply misread something. But it was just a note. Just words on paper, the kind that sound cheerful but feel hollow. I sat down at the kitchen table. The clock ticked above me, sharp and precise. I thought about texting Jamie. Just a small message. Hope the kids have fun. But my fingers didn't move. Instead, I looked out the window at the empty driveway. The house was quiet again. Not the peaceful kind. Not the hush that comes after laughter or during a deep breath. This was the other kind. The kind that hums like static, like a song you once knew, but can't quite remember the tune. I made toast. Apricot jam again. The last jar. I hadn't planned on opening it, but what else was I saving it for? As I ate, I thought about how I used to make a checklist for the lake trip, printed and laminated. I'd tape it to the fridge and let the kids help. Now there was no checklist, no fridge tape. Just a table and a quiet woman with jam on her fingers and too many bins by the door. I put the bins back into the hallway closet, stacked them neatly, closed the door. That evening, I lit a candle in the den, one of those little ones from the Christmas set Lily had given me 5 years ago. She probably forgot it came from her. I hadn't. I sat with my tea, the room dim except for the flicker of light. And for a moment, I imagined the dock, the breeze off the lake, the soft thud of bare feet on old wood. I imagined Emma turning back, just once, to wave. But she didn't, and the dock faded into the stillness again. I didn't cry. That's the part no one ever understands. They expect tears, expect trembling hands, and runny mascara, and some kind of spectacle to mark a woman's unraveling. But that's not how it happens. It happens in the quiet. In the small hours of the morning, when the refrigerator hums louder than your heartbeat, and the house creaks like it's trying to remember who used to live inside it. That Friday, after they left for the lake, I didn't get dressed. I stayed in my nightgown, the soft flannel one with the blue buttons, a little frayed at the cuffs, and I wandered the house like a ghost who hadn't figured out it was time to go. I emptied the dishwasher, not because it needed it, just because. I lined up the plates by size, the forks in their narrow compartment, the glasses all facing the same way. When you start fussing over the direction of glasses, you're not organizing, you're grasping, trying to control something, anything, when everything else has been quietly taken out of your hands. They hadn't asked if I wanted to go, not even once, and I hadn't asked either. That's what's strange, isn't it? I said nothing. I made it easy for them. I let myself become invisible. Because the alternative, having to explain why you still matter, is somehow more humiliating than being forgotten altogether. I sat on the edge of my bed that afternoon, folding socks I hadn't worn in weeks. I placed each one gently beside its pair, like I was performing a ritual, a ceremony for the parts of myself no one saw anymore. I looked around the room, the books on the shelf I hadn't touched in months, the dusty framed photo of Paul and me in front of the old grill at the cabin, his arms slung around my shoulder like I was something he'd earned. And I whispered, just to the air, where did I go? Because I didn't recognize myself anymore. Not in the mirror, not in the habits, not in the voice that said, I'm fine, every time someone asked, not really listening for the answer. When was the last time someone truly looked at me, not past me, not through me, at me? It's strange what the body remembers. The way my hand still reaches to turn on the porch light at dusk, even though no one visits. The way I still check the front step for packages I didn't order, for company that doesn't come. My body goes through the motions like a clock that no one winds, still ticking, but with no purpose but to tick. That evening I made dinner. For no one. A single chicken breast, steamed green beans, a scoop of mashed potatoes with too much pepper. I sat at the table and ate it like a stranger in a diner. No conversation, no warmth, no reason. Afterward, I washed the plate, dried it, and placed it back in the cupboard like I hadn't used it at all. Because that's what I'd become. Someone whose presence leaves no trace. I walked to the living room, stared at the empty space above the mantel, where the family portrait used to hang. I took it down last month, not in anger, just as a quiet admission. They hadn't noticed, or if they did, they didn't ask. That was the moment I realized I could disappear completely, and it would take them a while to find out. Not because they're cruel. They're not. They're busy. They have children and spreadsheets and school drop-offs and salads to toss and group chats to monitor. There's always something. I used to be something. Now I'm filler, the space between appointments, the one who watches the house, the one who's too fragile for lake trips, but strong enough to fold their laundry and remember to defrost the chicken before 6. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the fan whirl in the corner, cooling a room that didn't need cooling. My legs ached, a hollow ache, the kind that starts in the joints and ends somewhere behind your eyes. I closed them, hoping for dreams, but even those stayed away. It was just me and the dark. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sad. I felt tired, bone-deep tired. The kind of tired you can't nap away. The kind of tired that comes from being reduced, day by day, year by year, until all that's left is a shell that says yes when it wants to say no, that waits when no one is coming, that loves without being remembered. And still, I would have gone, if they had asked. I would have packed my bag, brought the good sun hat, baked the cookies they pretend not to eat, and smiled for the pictures they never print. Because I remember what it used to feel like, to be included, to be seen, and that memory, that ache, is the only thing that reminds me I was ever real to them at all. The morning after they left for the lake, I didn't move right away. I sat in the kitchen, the light slanting in through the window just the way Paul used to like it, soft, golden, gentle across the linoleum floor. Dust hung in the beam like little dancers, undisturbed. I stirred my tea slowly. The spoon made a soft, circular clink against the ceramic. There was no toast, no breakfast. Just the tea, steeped too long, bitter in a way that matched the quiet in the room. That's when I realized something, not all at once, but like fog lifting from the edge of the lake. It wasn't grief I was feeling anymore. It wasn't even loneliness. It was clarity. Something had to change. Not them. Not Jamie or Lily or the kids. I had no illusions left there. They were who they were. People with good intentions and distracted hearts. No, the change had to be me. Because I was tired of being a shadow in my own life. Tired of saying, it's fine, when it wasn't. Tired of pretending I didn't care when they didn't ask, didn't include, didn't notice. I looked at the tea, the cold ring it left on the counter, and I thought, I'm still here. Not as an afterthought, not as a placeholder for casseroles and carpools. I'm still here. And if no one else remembered that, then maybe I had to be the one who did. That afternoon, I walked to the coat closet and opened the door. The lake bag sat on the floor, same one I'd used every summer since the boys were small, green canvas with a tear at the side and a zipper that always caught. I knelt slowly, my knees protesting the effort, and unzipped it. Inside, the old dock shoes, still sandy from last year, a folded beach towel, pale yellow, with my name stitched into the corner by Paul, back when stitching was how he passed quiet evenings. A half-empty bottle of sunscreen, expired but still familiar. I touched each item like it was an artifact from another life, a life where I belonged. I didn't pack it, not yet. I just sat with it for a moment, let my fingers rest on the fabric, let the memories rise, not to ache, but to remind. I stood and moved to the hallway, past the framed pictures, past the thermostat Jamie never let me adjust. In the living room, the fireplace mantel sat bare where the family photo used to be. It looked naked without it. Honest. I paused in front of the shelf where I kept the address book. The old kind, paper and pen, corners worn from years of flipping to the same names. I opened to the section marked C. There it was, Clearwater Cabins, a number scribbled beside it. My handwriting shaky, but still mine. I closed the book, didn't reach for the phone. Not yet. I wasn't ready to act, but I knew I would, because something inside had shifted. Not a revolt, not a rebellion, just a quiet, anchored truth. I didn't need to be asked to exist. I didn't need an invitation to show up for my own memories. The lake belonged to me, too. The dock, the sound of the loons at dusk, the ritual of roasted marshmallows and citronella candles and mosquito-bitten ankles. All of it. They hadn't built that place. Paul and I did, with borrowed tools and blistered palms and laughter that echoed through the trees. They just visited. But I had lived it, loved it, lost him in it, and I was still here. That night, I sat on the porch, wrapped in Paul's old sweater, and listened to the wind slip through the maple leaves. A dog barked 2 streets over, a sprinkler hissed on, a moth fluttered against the screen. I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. There was no one to share the decision with, no one to nod and say, "Yes, Mary, that's right." But it didn't matter, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to include me in their plans. I had my own. I'd go to the lake, not to disrupt, not to prove anything, just to be there, to reclaim something that had always been mine, even if they'd forgotten. That was the moment it started, not with a bang, not even with a whisper, just a breath and a decision, a quiet kind of bravery. The next morning, I made the bed, Not because anyone was coming over, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to, because I still mattered, even if no one else said so. I smoothed the sheets with care, tucked in the corners the way my mother taught me, fluffed the pillows, straightened the folded blanket at the foot. The small, quiet dignity of it steadied me. Then I walked into the kitchen and made tea. Not the bitter, over-steeped kind I'd been drinking for weeks. This time, I watched the clock. 3 minutes. Just right. I sat at the table and sipped slowly. The apricot jam jar was nearly empty, but I used the last spoonful anyway. Spread it across one slice of toast, thick and golden and still warm from the toaster. I ate every bite. And then, only then, did I stand, rinse the dish, and pick up the address book again. Clearwater Cabins. The number hadn't changed. I dialed. The phone rang 3 times before a woman answered. Her voice was young, cheerful. Clearwater, this is Tracy. How can I help you? I cleared my throat. Hi there. I was wondering if the 1-bedroom is available next week. There was a pause, the click of keys, the sound of her chewing on the end of a pen. Let me see. Yes, we actually just had a cancellation. Sunday through Friday. That work? That works perfectly, I said. Would you like to book it? I looked out the window. The sun was beginning to lift, sliding through the trees and catching on the edge of the porch. Yes, I said. I'd like to book it under Miriam Lee. I hadn't used my full name in years. Everyone called me Mom, or Grandma, or Mary if they were feeling brisk. But Miriam Lee was who I had been long before I'd belonged to anyone else. Tracy read back the details. 1-bedroom, lakeside view. Rustic charm, no Wi-Fi. A dock just steps away. Total $582. I didn't blink. She asked for my card number. I gave it. When she finished the confirmation, I said quietly, Can I request a fire ring? Already included, actually. Each cabin has one, she replied. Do you need firewood? We can stack some for you. No need, I said, smiling. I'll bring my own. I hung up and let the silence settle around me. Not empty, not lonely, just full. I stood, opened the hall closet, and pulled out the suitcase I hadn't used since Paul's memorial trip to New Mexico, a trip no one had joined me for. The suitcase still smelled faintly of cedar and lavender sachets. I opened it on the bed and began to pack. Simple things, comfortable things. A soft cotton dress, the wide-brimmed hat Paul used to tease me about. Mary, that hat could shade a whole city block. Sensible shoes, my own pillow. I liked the way it cupped my neck. And a thermos. Not the new metal one Jamie gave me 2 Christmases ago, still unopened in its box, but Paul's old green one, with the dent in the side. I went to the pantry and pulled out the skewers, the long-handled ones with the wood grips. The ones we used every summer. They still worked fine. I added a small bag of marshmallows. Not the fancy-flavored kind. Just the classic white pillows that caught fire beautifully when you weren't careful. Then I opened the drawer where I kept my old camera. Not a phone, a real camera. Battery still worked. I packed it, too. Before I zipped the suitcase, I added something small, a photo, the one from the first lake summer. Paul holding Jamie on his shoulders. Michael with a dragonfly in his hair. Me in cut-off jeans and a smile so wide it made my cheeks ache to look at it now. I tucked it inside the inner pocket. By mid-afternoon, everything was ready. I stood in the doorway of my room and looked at the packed bag. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't escape. It was declaration. A quiet one. A personal one. I was going to the lake, not to be seen, not to make a point, just because I wanted to, because I deserved to feel the sun on my face and the sand between my toes and the sting of smoke in my eyes from a campfire. I lit myself. No one needed to know. No one needed to approve. This wasn't about them. This was about me and the woman I still was, even if they no longer looked close enough to see her. That night, I made a list. Not for groceries or appointments or family errands. Just a few things. Things to bring. Book I actually want to read. Paul's sweater, one good memory, matches, marshmallows, my own damn self. And at the bottom, I wrote, "You are allowed to exist, even when uninvited." I tore the list from the pad, folded it neatly, and tucked it in my purse. Then I turned off the lights and went to bed, knowing, finally, that I wasn't waiting anymore. I was moving. The morning I left the cabin, the lake was still. It always seemed to hush itself at dawn, like even the water was catching its breath. The loons hadn't started yet. The wind was somewhere else. The air held that early coolness that made your sweater feel like an embrace. I stood on the porch with my mug, watching the sun paint long lines across the water. My fingers wrapped around the ceramic like it might anchor me to the moment just a little longer. In the distance, I could see the main cabin. Their cabin. Lights were still off, curtains drawn. They wouldn't know I'd been here. Not unless someone checked the background of a photo or looked closely at the reflection in the lake. And that was fine. I hadn't come to be noticed. I'd come to remember, to feel the gravel under my shoes, to roast a marshmallow that burned on one side and stayed cold in the middle, to walk the path and hear the pines whisper like they used to when Paul and I would sneak away before the kids woke. I'd come to make peace with the ghost of who I'd been in this place, and to meet who I still was. It hadn't been lonely. Not really. There were moments. Yes. Moments where I watched Emma run down the dock from behind a tree line, her laughter echoing so close I could almost believe she was calling my name. But I didn't cry. Instead, I turned back to my fire ring, slid a fresh marshmallow onto a skewer, and roasted it just the way she liked. Golden, even. When the knock came, when Emma showed up with 2 marshmallows in hand and asked if she could sit, I didn't say much. We didn't need to. We just sat, together. No questions, no explanations. She handed me one of the marshmallows. I offered her the stick. When she whispered, "Next year, you can stay with me," I didn't answer. I only nodded, because some promises are too precious to echo aloud. Now, with the sun just beginning to warm the edge of the dock, I zipped up my suitcase. I'd packed lightly, left the books unread, brought back a dozen quiet memories instead. The camera was full, not of selfies, but of small things. A feather caught on a branch, a shadow stretching over the dock, the fire glowing orange against my cup. I'd delete none of them. I stepped outside, breathing in one last scent of pine and wood smoke. Then I walked the short trail that curved toward their cabin, the same one Paul used to take when we'd deliver hot cocoa or forgotten beach toys. I hadn't walked it in years. It felt smaller now. Or maybe I'd just grown. When I reached their mailbox, a chipped blue box still hanging crooked on its post, I pulled the envelope from my bag, cream-colored, handwritten. Inside was a single photo, our first summer at the lake. Paul grinning, shirtless, sunburnt, a boy on each arm. Me behind them, laughing, unposed, unaware the camera had clicked. I'd written on the back, in ink just faded enough to soften the edges. "Thanks for the memories. I kept them safe." I slid the envelope inside, closed the lid. No fanfare, no signature. I didn't need one. They'd recognize my handwriting, if they looked. I turned back toward the path, the trees rising around me like an honor guard. My suitcase rolled easily behind me, wheels clicking softly over packed dirt and pine needles. And with every step, I felt lighter. Not because I was leaving anything behind, but because I finally understood. I didn't need to carry it all anymore. Their love, their permission, their space. I had mine. I reached the edge of the lake one last time, looked out across the glassy water, now shimmering with new light, and I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. They forgot who built the dock. Then I smiled, not sad, not bitter, just sure. I remembered how to float, and I walked on. There's a certain silence that doesn't sting anymore. It doesn't ache like it used to, doesn't echo around the ribcage, like it's trying to remind you of all the rooms you're not welcome in. No, this kind of silence is different. It's full, like a warm quilt pulled over your shoulders, like the hush of the lake at sunrise, like your own name spoken gently back to you after too long. That's what I felt driving home from the cabin. The radio was off, the windows cracked. The pine-sweet air braided itself into my sweater sleeves, and the morning light touched the tops of the trees like a benediction. I didn't rush. There was nothing waiting at home but a quiet house and a stack of library books I might finally finish. But I wasn't dreading the quiet anymore, because I wasn't going back empty. I'd brought something with me, something stronger than recognition, stronger even than being included. I brought myself, not the version of me they keep in the margins, the helper, the backup, the if you're not too tired, mom version. Not the tired smile, not the quiet nod, not the folded laundry and the forgotten birthday calls, but the woman who once built a life from scratch. The woman who carried toddlers through airport terminals with a diaper bag over one shoulder and a storybook in the other. The woman who cried on the kitchen floor when Paul died, then stood up and made a full breakfast the next morning, because the boys still need to eat. The woman who knew how to light a fire in the rain. I remembered her at the lake, not all at once, but in pieces, in the rhythm of my own footsteps down that familiar path, in the way my hand remembered exactly where the dock creaked, third board from the edge, in the way the sunset curled around me like it had been waiting all along. That's the thing about places we love. Even when people leave us behind, the place remembers. The pine remembers. The wind remembers. The water, always, remembers. I roasted marshmallows for one, and it wasn't lonely. I listened to old songs and didn't feel silly. I laughed, softly, once, when I dropped my stick into the fire, because Paul used to do the same thing and curse under his breath, and I'd say, language, even though the kids were long asleep. And when Emma came, with her tiny hands and shy smile and 2 marshmallows in her palm, I didn't ask questions. I just scooted over, handed her a skewer, and let the silence say what needed saying. Because love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. "Next year," she said, "you can stay with me." I didn't need a promise. The offer was enough. Not because I needed her to fix it, but because I could tell she saw me. That was the gift. That was the triumph. Not being invited, but no longer waiting to be. When I reached the edge of my street, I turned into the driveway slowly, The hydrangeas I planted in spring were blooming now, pale blue, soft as breath. I parked, sat a moment, then I reached into my bag and pulled out the camera. The photos would be waiting, small frames of light and shadow, none of them perfect, but real, proof, not for them, for me. Proof that I was there, that I showed up, that I didn't fade. I carried my suitcase to the porch. The key turned easily in the lock. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. Still, dim, familiar. I made tea. Apricot jam was gone, but honey would do. I sat in my chair by the window, looking out at the quiet street, and felt no longing, just calm. They might never know I'd gone, might never notice the envelope in the mailbox, or the way the firewood had been used a little more than they remembered. But that wasn't the point. The point was, I knew. I knew who I'd been, who I still was, and who I refused to stop being. I didn't need to be loud. I didn't need to take up space they weren't offering. I'd built my own. And in that space, there was fire. There was music. There was one marshmallow, roasted to golden perfection. There was a photo, a bench, a breeze, and there was me, whole, worthy, unmoved by absence. They forgot who built the dock. I remembered how to float, and I always will.